Baden Baden, Grand Duchy of Baden, 1886, just as the bells of Stiftskirche chimed 6 and the rain began to scatter over the red clay roofs like spilled pearls. Romy Maren stood beneath the awning of the Margrave stables, her velvet hem soaked and her gloves damp. Her riding habit dark green with gold piping clung to her legs in the downpour, though she didn't seem to notice. She was watching the horses, or perhaps pretending to. She was promised to Duke Friedrich von Dierken of Württemberg. The contract had been signed 3 days earlier in the presence of her father, the Margrave of Baden, and the Duke's emissary. She had not been asked, only presented. In 6 weeks, she would become the Duchess von Dierken, and her life would belong to a man she had spoken to only twice. A sudden crash startled one of the mares. Romy turned just in time to see a young man, shirt damp and collar unbuttoned, hurrying to calm the animal. He moved with practiced ease, murmuring something low and steady. The mare stilled under his hand. "That one's skittish in storms," he said without turning to her, his voice rough from work, not rudeness. "I gathered," Romy replied, brushing water from her sleeve. "You speak to her like she's a person. She listens better than most people." He turned then. He was perhaps a few years older than she, with wind-flushed cheeks and dark hair falling loose over his brow. His eyes were a grey-blue, sharp and tired, like river stone worn smooth by years. There was mud on his boots and a fresh tear in his shirt sleeve. She didn't recognize him. That meant he wasn't a servant of the house, nor a footman. Likely one of the stable hands brought in from the outer estate. He shouldn't have spoken to her. And yet. "Your name?" she asked. "Cassian Hale," he said, straightening. "I was sent from the Rodeln estate 2 weeks ago. They needed someone who knew horses." "I see. She should have left then. It would have been proper." But the rain was still falling, and her curiosity held her in place. "Do you always speak so plainly?" Cassian gave her a look that wasn't quite a smile. "Only when I'm wet and cold, my lady." She wasn't used to being addressed with such dry honesty. Not from men, and certainly not from stable hands. "Well," she said, "I hope the horses appreciate it. They don't complain." A gust of rain swept sideways under the awning. Romy flinched. Cassian stepped aside and pulled open the stable door. "You can wait inside," he said. "It's warmer there. I'm not supposed to be alone in buildings with men." He glanced behind him, as if checking for witnesses. "It's a stable, not a chapel." Still, she hesitated. Then she stepped inside. It smelled of hay, saddle soap, and rain. A cat darted past her boots and vanished behind a barrel. She stood near the doorway, arms folded. Cassian went to a chest in the corner and pulled out a dry wool blanket. "Here," he said, handing it to her without ceremony. She hesitated again, then took it. "Thank you." Cassian nodded and returned to brushing down the skittish mare. He didn't ask her questions. He didn't try to impress her. He just worked, steady and quiet. Romy watched him longer than she meant to. 2 days later, she saw him again. This time she was walking the garden path behind the old hunting lodge, trying to clear her head. The Duke had arrived at court that morning, and she had been summoned to greet him. He'd kissed her hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He spoke of hunting parties and diplomatic dinners. He never asked what she liked. He never noticed when she barely spoke. Cassian was near the orchard fence, fixing a broken gate. He straightened when he saw her. "My lady," he said, wiping his hands on his trousers. "Romy," she said. "If you're going to speak to me, use my name." Cassian blinked. "That would be improper." "So is speaking to me at all." She stepped closer, watching him tie off a splintered plank. She noticed a thin scar along his wrist, old and pale, and a small brass ring on his index finger. "You're not from Baden," she said. "No." "Where?" "Rhine border. My father was a cavalryman. We moved a lot." That explained the posture. The careful way he moved. Romy took a breath. I'm to marry the Duke, she said, watching his hand still. I heard. Do you know him? Cassian glanced at her. I know his kind. She didn't speak. The wind stirred the trees above, and a few apples dropped into the grass. I don't want it, she said quietly. Cassian didn't answer. Then, after a moment, why tell me? She looked at him fully. Because you're the only person who doesn't pretend. A week passed. They didn't meet often, and never in the same place twice. Once behind the dovecot, where Cassian slipped a folded note into her glove while her maid was distracted by a bee sting. Another time in the chapel yard, where he handed her a sprig of wild rosemary without a word. Always brief. Always careful. She learned his favorite horse was a black gelding named Flint. That he carved little animals from wood scraps when he couldn't sleep. That he liked thunderstorms. He learned she hated lace collars and preferred riding to dancing. That she collected pressed flowers in a leather book she kept hidden in her bureau drawer. That she once tried to run away when she was 12, but only made it to the orchard. Their words were few. Their gestures said more. A shared umbrella when the sky cracked open again. A brush of fingers as he passed her a saddlebag. A stolen glance through the hedge during a formal garden party. And then 14 days before the engagement ball Romy found a letter tucked beneath her tea tray. It was unsigned, but the handwriting was unmistakable. If you truly don't want it, say so. I'll ride at dawn. Meet me at the south gate. We'll go. No one will stop us. Her throat closed. Her fingers shook. She folded the note and slid it into her skirt pocket just as her maid returned with hairpins. Her mother entered a moment later, speaking of guest lists and the new embroidery on her gown's hem. But Romy's mind was already at the south gate. That night, she didn't sleep. She paced. She stared out the window. She pressed her palm to her chest as if trying to quiet the storm inside. She thought of the Duke's cold eyes. Of the contract. Of her father's pride. And then she thought of Cassian's hand on the mare's neck. Of the rosemary. Of his voice, plain and steady. She made up her mind. Before the sun rose, Romy dressed in her simplest riding clothes, packed a small satchel, and slipped out the side door. Her boots were silent on the gravel path. Her heart beat like a drum. Cassian was waiting at the south gate, Flint saddled, another horse beside him. He saw her and froze. You came, he said. She nodded. Are you sure? I don't want a life I didn't choose. He reached for her hand. Then choose this. She gripped his fingers. I already have. The narrow forest road twisted beneath them as mist unfurled through the trees, soft and low like breath. Cassian rode ahead, posture alert but unhurried, while Romy followed just behind, her hands sore from the reins, her thighs aching from the saddle's strain. The rhythm of hooves over damp earth became a quiet promise between them, not of safety yet, but of movement, of change. They had been riding since just before first light, keeping off the main roads, avoiding wayposts where questions might be asked. Cassian knew the terrain well enough to lead them eastward into the foothills, toward the lesser estates near the Black Forest's edge where the Margrave's reach thinned. At midday, they stopped near a low clearing where wild thyme grew between stones. Cassian tied the horses beneath a leaning pine and motioned for Romy to sit. She did, tugging off her gloves with stiff fingers. You're tired, he said. And you're not? I've done worse. He pulled a cloth bundle from his saddlebag and unwrapped coarse bread, a wedge of hard cheese, and a handful of hazelnuts. This isn't court fare. I didn't expect roasted quail, she said, accepting a piece of bread. Though, I wouldn't mind tea. He lifted a brow. You'll find no samovars here. Romy took a bite, chewed slowly. The bread was dry and the cheese sharp, but it tasted more honest than anything she'd eaten under chandeliers. She looked over at him, seated cross-legged against a tree trunk, sleeves rolled and jaw dusted with stubble. A leaf clung to his knee. You don't ask many questions, she said. I don't need answers I already know. She turned to face him fully. And what do you think you know? That you left everything you've ever been told was yours. That you don't do that for someone you're unsure of. Her throat tightened. I barely know you. Cassian looked at her steadily. You know how I treat animals. You know how I listen. You know what kind of man I am when no one's watching. She reached for a hazelnut. Her fingernails were chipped, she hadn't noticed. And you trust me? I saw you walk into the stables in the rain, wearing silk and defiance. I trust what I saw. They sat without speaking for a while. A jay called overhead, then flew off. When they mounted again, they kept to the shade of the trees, avoiding open fields. By late afternoon, the ground grew rockier, and the trees changed taller, less dense. They reached a bramble-choked rise where a narrow path led up to an abandoned watch station once used by border scouts. Cassian dismounted and helped her down. His hands were rough but careful. We'll stay here tonight, he said. There's a spring not far. Inside, the stone shelter was cold and empty save for a broken bench and an iron hook where a lantern once hung. Cassian cleared a space with his boot and unrolled his blanket. Romy sat against the wall, legs tucked beneath her, arms crossed for warmth. She watched him gather kindling from beneath the eaves and strike flint against a chilled stone. The fire caught slowly, curling yellow light around the walls. You've done this before, she said. Not with someone watching. She pulled her coat tighter. I don't know what happens next. He didn't look up. Neither do I. But we'll find work east. Small towns won't ask many questions. I can't keep hiding behind your knowledge. You won't have to. You'll learn. He added a twig to the flame. You're not helpless, Romy. You've just never been given the chance to need yourself. She stared into the fire. The warmth reached her hands now, but her thoughts were elsewhere. If my father sends men. He will. Then what? Cassian folded his arms. Then we keep moving. I have friends near the Oberkirch vineyards. They'll lie if asked. Is that where you meant to go all along? No. But I'm adapting. She glanced at him. Because of me? I didn't ride to the gate for anyone else. The fire crackled between them. Darkness pressed closer outside. Romy lay down on the blanket he'd spread, too tired to protest. He stayed upright, leaning against the wall. You won't sleep? She asked. Not yet. She turned her face toward him. I wasn't sure you'd be there. At the gate? She nodded. I was. She closed her eyes. When sleep came, it was dreamless. At dawn, he woke her with a touch to her shoulder. There's no trail behind us yet. But we can't linger. They rode again, this time through a narrow gorge where the stream ran high from spring runoff. The horses stepped carefully, their breath visible in the morning chill. Romy said little, conserving her strength. She had never gone so long without a bath, without proper meals, without knowing what day of the week it was. They passed a shepherd and his dog just past midday. The man gave a polite nod, eyes lingering on Romy's coat, but said nothing. Cassian didn't slow. By sunset, they reached a ridge where the trees opened onto a sloping field. In the distance, low smoke curled from a cluster of cottages, roofs thatched and dark against the hills. Cassian exhaled. That's where we'll stop. Do they know you? He gave a short nod. I helped their son after his cart turned last winter. They owe me no favors, but they won't turn us away. As they approached, a woman emerged from the lowest house, apron dusted with flour, sleeves rolled past her elbows. She squinted toward them, then waved them in. Inside, the hearth was already lit. The woman, whose name was Marta, offered them boiled potatoes, salt pork, and a corner of bread pudding. Romy ate in silence, the food warming her from the inside out. Cassian spoke little, only thanked their host and helped stack wood near the door. Later, in the loft above the barn, where Marta had laid down 2 woolen pallets, Romy lay beneath a coarse blanket, listening to rain begin on the roof. Cassian sat nearby, back against a beam. "Do you miss it?" she asked suddenly. "What?" "Whatever life you had before." He was quiet a long time. "Then, sometimes. But not in ways that matter." She shifted, pulling the blanket tighter. "I don't know if I'll be enough," she said. He looked at her. "You already are." She studied his face in the half-dark. "Will you stay if it gets harder?" "I'll stay even if it gets impossible." And for the first time since they'd fled, she smiled not out of relief, but because she believed him. By the end of the second week in the hills above Oberkirch, Romy had learned how to feed chickens without flinching, how to carry water from the well without soaking her skirt hem, and how to braid her hair without the help of a lady's maid. Her palms were raw in places, the skin just beginning to thicken from the unfamiliar rhythm of labor. Marta had taught her how to knead dough by feel, not measurement, and how to tell if a cow was about to calve by the twitch of its tail. Cassian had taken work with one of the vintners at the edge of the village. He left early and returned past dusk, hands stained with grape must and earth, shoulders heavier than when she'd first known him. Still, he greeted her each evening with the same quiet steadiness that had drawn her to him in the first place. That evening, the air carried the scent of damp wood and crushed grape skins. Romy stood outside the barn, tying bundles of dried lavender Marta had asked her to prepare for storage. Her fingers moved slowly, not from exhaustion but from thought. "You're not afraid of bees anymore," Cassian said behind her. Romy didn't turn. "I still don't like them." "But you don't run." "I haven't got the time." He stepped beside her, his coat patched at the elbow. "I saw you helping with the cider press yesterday. It was better than sorting wormy apples." He nodded once, watching her hands. "You've changed." She paused, then resumed tying. "Or maybe I've just started to show what was always there." Cassian reached into his coat and pulled out a folded scrap of paper. "A traveler passed through the vineyard today. He left this at the inn. Said a man near Freiburg had shown it around." Romy took it carefully. The paper was coarse, the ink smudged. It was a sketch, a hastily drawn likeness of her face and a vague description of height, hair color, and a warning, "Missing noblewoman, daughter of the Margrave of Baden, presumed taken." "They think you stole me," she said. Cassian didn't answer immediately. "They'd rather believe a servant broke the rules than admit you had the will to walk away." Romy folded the paper and tucked it into her apron. "We'll have to move again. I've arranged for it. There's a widow in Riegel who needs help with her vineyard. She doesn't ask questions." Romy looked at him fully. "Are you tired of running?" He leaned against the barn wall. "No. But I hate seeing you forced to hide." She stepped closer, not touching yet. "I don't feel hidden when I'm with you. I feel chosen." Cassian looked down, the light catching the scar near his wrist. "You were never meant to be locked behind gates and lace. No one saw that but you." "I think you did," she said. He didn't speak, but the quiet between them shifted denser, warmer. "I want to go where you go," she said. "Not because I must. Because I choose to." Cassian's voice was low. "Then we'll go together." Later, under the low roof of the hayloft, they packed what little they now owned: a pair of blankets, a loaf wrapped in cloth, a tin of boiled sugar drops Marta had pressed into Romy's hands with a wink. "You'll write her," Cassian said. "If it's safe. She's been more mother to me than the one I was born to." Cassian rolled up his satchel. "We'll leave before the sun rises. Take the river road." Romy nodded. She sat on the edge of the loft, legs tucked beneath her, watching the last bit of blue drain from the sky. "You never told me what you wanted before all this," she said. Cassian held her gaze. "I wanted a place to be still." "And now?" He moved beside her, his voice quieter than before. "Now I want a place to belong. With you." She reached for his hand, rough and warm against hers. "Then let's find it." The road to Riegel dipped through valleys thick with elder and rowan, the scent of wet bark rising with each shallow bend. They rode only in the pale hush before sunrise and after twilight, resting in barns and hay sheds offered by those who asked no questions, or simply didn't care to. By the time they reached the widow's land on the northern slope of the Kaiserstuhl, the vines had already begun to sprout their pale green fingers toward the sun. Romy dismounted stiffly, her body sore from days in the saddle, but her gaze steady. The house was small, half-timbered and weathered, with a crooked fence of birch and alder. Beyond it, rows of early shoots stretched toward the hills like lines on a page waiting to be written. The widow's name was Gertrude, her hands broad and scarred, her shoulders rounded from years of lifting casks. She greeted them with a nod and little else, and by the time the sun had fully risen, Cassian was already hauling sacks of loam to the lower rows while Romy followed Gertrude into the shed to sort pruning shears and oil the hinges of the press. "You've not done this before," Gertrude said, not unkindly, as Romy struggled to twist the rusted bolt loose. "But you don't flinch from it." "I don't see the use in pretending I'm fragile," Romy said. Gertrude nodded once, then handed her a cloth soaked in vinegar. "Then you'll do." That evening, Romy stood at the edge of the vine rows, watching the light bleed into the western hills. Cassian was still working, sleeves rolled, arms streaked with dust and sap. He didn't notice her at first. She waited until he stood upright and wiped his brow with the back of his hand. "You don't rest," she said. He turned toward her, blinking at the low sun. "I rest when the work's done." She stepped closer, her hand still stained from walnut oil. "You never spoke much of your mother." "She died when I was young." His voice was even. "She liked to hum old cavalry songs while she cooked. My father used to joke she'd been born with a drum in her chest." Romy tilted her head. "And your father?" Cassian looked toward the hills. "He taught me to ride, to listen before I speak, and to never trust a man with soft hands and sharper words." She picked a small stone from the dirt at her feet. "My father taught me how to curtsy at 5 and how to lie with a smile at 10. You've unlearned both." "I'm trying." She let the stone fall. "Do you think this us can exist beyond borrowed roofs and secrecy?" Cassian considered her. "It has to." She stepped forward, the space between them closing like a door swinging quietly shut. "Then tell me how." "We save. We stay quiet. We wait until the season turns. Then we take a plot near the river, grow what we can. You can sell preserves. I'll take carpentry when the vines sleep." "And if they find us before that?" "Then they'll see nothing worth dragging back to court. A vintner's wife and a man with dirt under his nails." Her breath caught. "Is that what I'll be?" His response was simple. "If you want it." She reached up, brushing a leaf from his hair. "I think I want everything I was never allowed to name." That night, they slept in a loft above the crushing room, the scent of old grapes sharp in the air. A single oil lantern flickered beside the ladder, casting long shadows across the beams. Romy lay on her side, watching Cassian's outline in the dark. "Did you ever think we'd make it this far?" she asked. "I didn't let myself." "Why?" "Because it would have hurt more if we hadn't." She shifted closer, the hay crinkling beneath her. "It still could." He turned to face her. "But it hasn't yet." And in that moment, beneath the weight of silence and dust and all the lives they'd left behind, Romy reached for his hand not because she needed anchoring, but because she was ready to anchor something in return.